comprehensive set of policies and investments. So these sessions will showcase some of the global best practices and trend in transport decarbonizations with some innovative solutions.
So I'll do a quick rundown of the session. We will start with the opening remarks and then we will move to our panelists for presentation, and we'll have room for a question or two from the audience towards the end. I would also like to seek this opportunity to thank the Korean Green Growth Trust Fund for supporting this session with the live streaming. Let me now introduce Leo Hassan Ariz, who is the Vice President of the Transport Planning Authority, and he will be giving us his opening remarks.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome. First, let me start with the meeting with expression of my gratitude. I am grateful of the presence of so many of you here today, physically and virtually. And we are privileged to have you join us. You are the entire best representative of your entire entities with government, industrial, non-government organization, and the private sector. First and foremost, I would like to thank the World Bank teams for their cooperation. In addition, I would like to especially thank the speakers from Volvo, World Bank Global Maritime Forum, and Uber for allocation of their valuable time in order to join us today for enriching our event with their thoughtful experience. Obviously, the climate change affects life around the world. Rising temperature leads the droughts, raising sea level in range low-lying region, as well as extreme weather cause serious disruption. Climate change cannot be determined without transport decarbonization. According to the latest figure, transport emits around 23% of energy related to CO2, feeds global warming. Without urgent action, it is possible that proportion will reach 40% by 2030. Over the last 50 years, transportation emissions have increased faster compared to the other sector. Transport demand will continue to rise the next to any sector. Transport demand will continue to rise the next decades, as well as the result CO2 emission from transportation will not decrease but may grow by 60% by 2050. Transport particularly is difficult to decarbonize because it depends on oil for 92% of its energy. Therefore, the Egyptian government have realized the necessity of following sustainable transport, avoid, shift, improve framework through providing public transport such as monorail, metro, and light railway that doesn't depend on fossil fuel and at the same time provide a safe, comfortable, and fast means of transport which encourage individuals to shift to the mass transit, which turn leads the reduction of emissions. The Egyptian government spent about 3 trillion Egyptian pound on transport project and around 1 trillion 54 billion Egyptian pound on rail, metro, and light rail during the last 8 years. In addition, the Egyptian government planning to have high-speed railway with lengths about 2,100 kilometers during the next year. The Egyptian government needs on transforming city to green city through offering electric and gas buses beside electric cars. And today we are one of these cities, which is Sharm el-Sheikh. Our event today aims to promote the transition of sustainable green transport. The speaker will share their knowledge and experience on low produce travel, shift travel, demand on low emission transport, and transition from carbon transition ICE vehicle to low no emission vehicle. They will also show their effort toward enabling 100% of rides in zero-emission travel modes, and potential role of shared mobility platform to support transition to sustainable transport system. So I hope this session will inspire policy makers to in their own decarbonization agenda. Finally, an event like this doesn't come together overnight. That's why I also want to express my deepest gratitude to the team who coordinate the extraordinary event over several months. Thank you.
Thank you, General Hassan, for the inspiring opening remark. So I would like to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Andrea Fodder from the Volvo Group. Andrea holds the position Chief Purchasing Officer and is a member of the Volvo Group Executive Group. So her team is focusing on a net zero greenhouse gas supply network of 2040, by 2040. So welcome, Andrea.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this great event, and thank you so much for your inspiring introduction words. Volvo Group is producing trucks, buses, construction equipment and power solutions, but we are not producing cars. So we are really a transport company producing commercial vehicles which have to run for our customer, so a truly B2B business. And like you already said, the need of transport in the next years will just increase. We are still in a time where the population of the world is increasing, and transport is needed to bring the things which are to the people which are needed for daily life. But what is also clear, we cannot scale up transport like we have done it in the past, because we are outside the boundaries of the world. So we have to do transport in a different way. And therefore we as Volvo Group, we have made a very bold commitment. We have given the commitment that 2040 we will have a greenhouse gas neutral value chain. Why 2040 when we see many countries expect this from us 2050 or even later? But if I take just Europe as an example, Europe wants to be a green continent 2050. If we then want to have a climate neutral fleet on the street, we must be ready 2040, because our products are on average 10 years in use. So there is no way out. 2040 is not far away. It is more or less tomorrow. So we have to start now. And we invest a lot in technology. And actually we are investing in 3 clear technology streams. Battery electric products, fuel cell electric products, but we also still invest in combustion engine. Of course, not run by fossil fuels, but by biofuels or even by green hydrogen. And why do we still invest in 3 technologies? Because there will be different opportunities in different countries of the world. We are a global player, and whatever ambition we take is for our global business, and we have production sites and employees on all the continents of the world. And to serve all our customers, we must have a broad portfolio of technologies which work for our customers in specific countries. Investing in these 3 technologies, aiming for a carbon neutral, a greenhouse gas neutral value chain 2040 is a massive challenge. And no company in the world can do this in isolation. Not even an industry can do this by themselves. And therefore, we strongly believe in working in ecosystems, in partnerships, developing new business models. And that this is not just a talk. I can show you on my next slide. This is just a small example of all the partnerships we are in. And you see a complete different ones. So if I just want to highlight some, we are in a partnership with Samsung SDI for battery cells. We have together with a competitor, we have found a joint venture to produce commercial vehicle optimized fuel cells. So with Daimler Truck, we have found a 50-50 joint venture called Cell-Centric. So we should even not shy away to cooperate with competitors when it makes sense for the acceleration of the transformation. You see here many more. Just on Tuesday at the First Movers Coalition, I announced, for example, a new partnership with the Danish wind turbine producer Vestas, because we want together increase the access to green energy, to green hydrogen. Or another small example, we started together with a Swedish airline the first commercial flying route using 50% sustainable aviation fuel. And you're not allowed to go higher than 50%. But we are ready to invest in these things to make it tangible for everyone, also our own employees, that our ambition is clear and we go full speed into it. Talking about the First Movers Coalition, I don't know if everyone in the room understands what this is really about. The First Movers Coalition was founded last year at the COP26 in Glasgow with Secretary John Kerry. And the heart of this First Movers Coalition is that public and private purchasing teams use in their demands requirements which will accelerate the transformation, asking for fossil-free products, asking for decarbonized solutions. So only together, when we work hand in hand, public and private sector, cross-functionally, in an ecosystem, in new partnerships, in different ways of working, we can shape the world we, our children, want to live in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea. This was very interesting. Allow me now to introduce Mr. Nicolas Pelletier-Tiberge, who is the Global Director of the Transport Sector in the Infrastructure Practice Group of the World Bank. Nicolas has joined the bank in 2002 and has held several leading positions and managed investments in Latin America, Africa, MENA, and the Caribbean. Nicolas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. So at the World Bank, transport decarbonization has become as our number one priority. And the way we like to frame the way we decarbonize transport is to use a very well-known framework, the Avoid, Shift and Improve framework, to which we usually add a resilience pillar to reflect the fact that we need to build infrastructure that are climate resilient. So today I'm going to present how railways program for both passenger and for freight can contribute to each pillar of this strategic framework. So let me first start with the Avoid pillar. Because railway programs are very large anchor investments, they usually offer good opportunities to rethink spatial development and the way we can change people's mobility patterns. At the bank, we now systematically advise our partner countries to look at railway programs since the very early stage of the planning process, with a transit-oriented development lens. And this can allow to both promote economic development and to optimize mobility patterns. Indeed, integrating land use and high-capacity transit systems can reduce the number and the length of trips, while encouraging the use of other cleaner mode of transport like non-motorized transport. So let me give you a couple of examples of the way railway programs can contribute to this avoid objective. One well-known example of TOD is the case of Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and how the Kuala Lumpur Central passenger transport terminal developed through a PPP, where a private developer was responsible for building and operating that station in exchange for the right to develop 30-hectare sites, became a new urban center with the mixed-use development and an impressive aggregate floor area of 22 million square feet that reached in 2000 daily ridership of 280,000 trips per day. That's one of the most impressive examples of how a railway program can transform a city. For freight transport, we also have some good examples, and one of them is the concept of freight villages, where cluster freight activities can be developed around well-connected intermodal terminals. In Australia, for example, a Moorbrook Logistics Park is one example of a project in suburban Sydney that directly links the container port terminals and warehousing via a railway program, and was able to significantly reduce the need for track street. Let me now move to the second pillar, the shift pillar. Rail transport is well known to allow shifting from carbon-intense modes of transport, such as cars and trucks, to lower emitting and more efficient modes, such as rail, even when those are powered by diesel fuels. Moving traffic from air or road to diesel-powered rail will reduce emissions by 70% or more per passenger kilometer or per ton kilometers. This can be an important part of the transition path towards the net zero objective for transport. A couple of examples again. For passenger transport, Jakarta is a good example where a commuter rail program that operates a high-frequency train service at modest fare helped reduce 9% of Jakarta's transport emission in 2019. For freight transport, India has a very successful program of truck-on-train services, which encourage a modal shift from trucks to rail. The service can handle 300 trucks per day and can deliver the trucks in 10 hours as compared to 24 to 36 hours by road. In the first 11 months of operations, the service transported nearly 5,000 trucks, saving over 2,000 tons of GHG emissions. Let me move to the improve pillar and present how we can improve the carbon efficiency of railway programs. The largest potential improvement resides in electrification of diesel operations, assuming that the electricity source is green. Fixed electric power supply infrastructure will require a minimum traffic density of between 5 and 10 million gross tons for electrification in order to be commercially viable. And that's a threshold that we have to keep in mind because of the capital cost and the recurrent maintenance cost. In the very near future, new innovations such as the development of battery, electric and hydrogen traction will both transport passenger and freight services. These alternatives are already being tested in service and should be widespread use by 2035 or 2040. Many diesel locomotives could then also be retrofitted. The transition away from diesel traction obviously needs to be managed in coordination with the power sector. Many developing countries face difficulties in generating sufficient power and distributing it reliably. Thus, the timing of the rail transition to alternative transport energy sources must dovetail with the development of the energy sector. Finally, let me say a few words about resilience. There are several ways railway programs can help countries in building resilience and adapting to climate change. For example, railways are less susceptible to fuel prices shocks since they are more fuel efficient than trucks, and fuel constitutes a much smaller share of their operating costs. That's a really important element to keep in mind when we transition to railway programs. From a network perspective, improving railways build a multimodal and redundant network that is more resilient to shocks. Railways also typically have high infrastructure design and operational standards because railway infrastructure is exposed to extreme climate conditions. In terms of passenger transport, railways provide affordable means for the vulnerable people to access economic opportunities, building a better resilience of the economy. Therefore, railways contribute to both climate change mitigation and adaptation. Let me now end with a few words about our railway portfolio. The World Bank currently finances railway investment projects in 11 countries with a total financing of $2.4 billion. Our approach is not only to finance infrastructure investments, but also to achieve development results and outcomes and ensure the sustainability of those programs through policy and regulatory reforms and institution building. I cannot end without mentioning that the World Bank, together with other development institutions, is very proud to be a partner of Egypt to advance its ambitions for the railway sector. We have 2 active projects in Egypt which are focused on supporting the country in its efforts to make railways safer and to decarbonize passenger and freight transport. The first railway improvement and the first project is the Railway Improvement and Safety for Egypt project. With the $440 million in financing, Egypt National Railways is modernizing its signaling equipment together with track upgrades along the Alexandria-Cairo Ayut Nag Hammadi corridor, which is the backbone of the Egyptian economy. The second one is the Cairo-Alexandria Trade Logistics Development Project, whose financing agreement was signed here in Sharm el-Sheikh on October 8. This $400 million worth program will help develop a bypass freight link between Alexandria and the dry port in Greater Cairo to encourage modal shifts from trucks to freight trains. This is another excellent example of how Egypt will be able to achieve its decarbonization objectives through a successful railway program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicolas. I would like to introduce Dr. Lau Blackstood. Sorry. Lau is the Senior Project Manager from the Global Maritime Forum, where he supports the Getting to Zero Coalition's work on zero emission shipping and public-private collaborations. Lau was Denmark's lead GHG negotiator at the International Maritime Organizations. So, welcome, Lau.
Thank you, Susan, for the introduction. And thanks to World Bank and the government of Egypt for this opportunity to speak about maritime transport decarbonization. Thank you for opening remarks. So far. In my short presentation, I will give you a crash course in shipping decarbonization and seek to answer one crucial question. How do we overcome the chicken and egg problem of supply and demand, zero emission solutions for shipping? So just a bit about the Getting to Zero Coalition. It is an industry-led platform for collaboration that brings together leading stakeholders from across the maritime and the fuels value chains with the financial sector and other committed actors to making commercially viable zero-emission vessels a scalable reality by 2030 towards full decarbonization by 2050. Like Andrea said, we need the solutions to be ready, thinking about the average lifetime of the assets of the trucks of the ships. And a ship has a 20-year average lifetime, so they need to be commercially viable by 2030. Not, of course, the whole fleet, but it needs to be the choice in 2030. The Getting to Zero Coalition is a partnership between the Global Maritime Forum and the World Economic Forum. At COP26 last year, more than 240 maritime companies and organizations from across the globe and value chain presented a call to action for shipping decarbonization to global policymakers, asking them to take ambitious policy action. And signatories to this call to action are already fully committed and taking action, but also stress the need to work together with governments. Shipping accounts for almost 3% of global emissions, similar to aviation. And shipping is responsible for around 80% of world trade. So it's fundamental to decarbonize shipping if we want to decarbonize our economy. All companies and governments must support shipping decarbonization if they're serious about reducing Scope 3 emissions. Emissions from shipping can be divided in international and domestic shipping, 70% and 30% respectively. For international shipping, we have the International Maritime Organization that regulates emissions from ships. And in 2018, the IMO set an emission level of reducing emissions by 50% in 2050 compared to 2008. This is, however, far from delivering shipping's fair share of global reductions aligned with IPCC science and the 1.5 temperature goal. Luckily, governments and the IMO now have a window of opportunity to raise ambition as the IMO will adopt a new strategy next year in July 2023. For domestic shipping, governments are responsible and should include emissions in their NDCs, but to date, not many governments have. Crossing international and domestic shipping emissions, we also have EU regulation, and the EU is right now finalizing its Fit for 55 policy package and will very soon regulate both international and domestic shipping emissions within European jurisdiction through, for example, a fuel standard, the ETS, and other specific regulation. But here there's also room for improvement to get to the point we need to go to. So let me just quickly explain how shipping's decarbonization transition could play out. Looking at other historical transition phases, we know that there are three phases: an emergence phase, where we're now, a diffusion phase, and a reconfiguration phase. So we are in the emergence phase, focused on learnings and driving down costs. Right now, we don't have everything on the water. We don't have the cheap new fuels. In the diffusion phase, we will have the cost-competitive, scalable zero-emission fuels and commercially viable zero-emission vessels. And this will allow the market to effectively scale up the new solutions. We know that to be able to reach this diffusion phase, we need to reach this tipping point of 5% scalable zero-emission fuels in use in international shipping, and we will have the zero-emission vessels that are commercially viable. So that is what we need to aim for in this decade. To do this, shipping companies alone and together with governments can work to establish, for example, green corridors, pilot and demonstration projects. A green corridor is a fit-for-purpose solution because they can be deployed now as a form of special economic zone at sea and be driven by first-mover action. We also know that in this decade, not everyone will need to decarbonize in this emergence phase. What is important, though, is that everyone begin to plan for how they will be part of the diffusion phase. How will they be ready to buy the new vessels in 2030? How will companies be able to deliver the new fuels in 2030? So we need to start planning today. Also, thinking about enabling an inclusive and equitable and effective scale-up and uptake of zero-emission fuels, technologies and vessels, as many countries as possible should be engaged in some form in this decade. But will the vessels be built if there's no or low supply of fuels? Will energy companies produce or distribute the fuels if there's no or only low demand for vessels and fuels? So the good news is that we already know what to do and how to do it. And there are many opportunities, and there's actually a lot of finance just waiting for the right policy signal to begin to invest in the new fuels and vessels. We're already seeing many green corridors being announced, for example, Shanghai, LA, Singapore, Rotterdam, Australia, and North Asia. And we know that EU regulation can drive this as well. There's significant potential for renewable energy in developing countries, and finance is ready. So to end my talk, I just want to emphasize that the IMO has this opportunity next year to set the right policy signals to enable countries to develop new energy projects with shipping as the key off-taker of new fuels. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Lau, for this very informational crash course. I would like now to introduce Mr. Chris Hook. Chris is the head of global sustainability at Uber. Chris leads Uber global sustainability strategy work, working with leaders and team across the company, including mobility, delivery, and freight, to shape Uber's collective response to the climate emergency. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having us, and thank you for the panelists for giving us so much information about how transport needs to shift across all the different modes. I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing at Uber and the focus that we have on decarbonising mobility in cities all over the world to move to a cleaner future. We have an ambition at Uber to be the cleanest platform on earth across all of the businesses that we operate. Our Uber Rides business is focused on moving people from where they are to where they need to be. Our delivery business, our freight business, and all the ways in which we can reimagine the way the world moves for the better. For us, that means getting as quickly as we possibly can to 100% zero emissions transport. We set ourselves a target to be 100% electric in Europe, US and Canada by 2030, and everywhere we operate by 2040. And we think we can see a path to get there, but there are three key things that we need to do. We need to help those who earn their living on Uber to make that transition as quickly as possible. We need to build products and services that the people who use Uber every day love and come back to. And we need to report on our progress and be transparent and participate in discussions like this one as we get there. Because as all of the panelists have said, no single company or single entity is going to be able to make this transition by themselves. So how are we helping our drivers go electric? Well, we talk all the time to those who earn their living through Uber about what it is that we need to do to help them get into the EV. The good news is that the appetite exists. There's an excitement about this transition. For unlike some of the other sectors that we talked about, passenger transportation has an opportunity in the near term to go quickly on this journey, but it isn't perfect today, and we have to try and address some core barriers. Electric vehicles are expensive. They're more expensive in most places than their combustion engine equivalents, so we need to do work to bring that cost down. There's concerns about how the charging infrastructure will work and how that rollout will happen in cities all over the world. And there's a knowledge gap, and there are companies like us and many of you in the room can do more to tell the story about why this is such a necessary transition and how we make it happen. the work that we're doing is to use our reach through our app and our technology to help build new ways in which drivers can learn about electric vehicles, can get access to them through partnerships, and can make that transition happen. We're all over the world designing programs to incentivize that transition to happen sooner, through providing discounts, through providing incentives, helping to run saving schemes so people can build up the capital that's required to invest in these vehicles. We're similarly trying to work with companies to roll out charging infrastructure, particularly infrastructure close to where people live, that they can use. And for those people who rely on their vehicle as their source of income, they can then be sure that there's going to be reliable, clean infrastructure to charge their vehicles. And advocating with governments and with lots of organisations for the kinds of policies that are going to make this transition happen quickly and happen equitably, and ensure that everybody can make the shift in the time frame that we need them to. One of the key ways that we can do that as a company is to build products that people want to use and people want to come back to. And so over the last couple of years, we've been focused heavily on how we build out options for those of us who want to use Uber to do so in a cleaner way. We have a product called Uber Green that's available in over 100 places across the world, where riders can select to get a trip that's only in an electric vehicle or a hybrid vehicle. We have an equivalent version of that in the US, which is our biggest market, called Comfort Electric, where you can select a premium EV vehicle. We have lots of different ways in which we're trying to move people to travel in lower emissions vehicles and to travel in more sustainable ways through sharing their ride, grouping together with others, thinking responsibly about how their trip can have a lower footprint of the planet. That also means not cars. It also means us working to ensure that people can use transit systems and make that part of their journey. They can use other forms of mobility, bikes, scooters, other ways to get from point A to point B. You know, if we are successful in our mission, then we will move car journeys into electric cars, but we will also be able to offer people a wider range of options about how they make the trip that they need to make. And we think that it's so far going quite well. We started this journey back in 2020, a year ago. You can see there in Glasgow, we had about 14,000 electric vehicles operating in the platform. We're now up to about 37,000. We've seen a big increase in the pace of adoption, and we're seeing people really get into these cars where they can and make that transition happen, and that turns into a lot of trips. You know, people use Uber all over the world. That means 19.5 million people are getting to experience this product every day, and we would hope to see this graph go up very rapidly over the next few years. And then finally, we feel like it's important that we build partnerships to make this happen, and we tell people what we are doing, what we're finding difficult, where the challenges are, so we can collaborate. The other panelists have said it too, but partnership is vitally important. For us, that means working with the car manufacturing industry, both established players and new players, to build those relationships and ensure those vehicles are available and accessible, and starting to build a whole network of relationships across the charging industry, so that as that industry matures and develops, it does so in a way that allows everybody to get these cars quickly. And it means working with a lot of different organisations to advocate for the kind of policies that we need collectively to make this transition happen. And finally, it means us being transparent about what we're doing, committing to things like science-based targets, committing to reporting to the TCFD, producing information, participating in events like today, so that we can tell our story and we can also learn from others as we are on this journey. So thank you very much for the time and for letting us talk about how we want to be part of the solution.
So thank you very much for our speakers this afternoon. Let's open up the floor for questions. Let's do two audience for questions.
Very informative session. I have many questions, but for time, just I will ask one question for Andrea. You mentioned that it's very important when you talked about the public-private purchase team, and you need to collaborate with your competitors. But what's about the supply chain regarding your business, regarding the suppliers, the manufacturers, distributors, all the rest of the members of the supply chain? I think it's very important if you highlight this. I know, of course, you do this, but I didn't find this in the presentation. It's very important, I think, rather than to talk about the collaboration with competitors. Of course, we need to collaborate with others, but I think the supply chain members is the backbone of the business regarding the, if we want to reach what's called zero gas emissions, either through carbon storage or find zero carbon renewable sources of energy and so on. So this one question, and the rest I will ask in the break. Thank you very much.
Let's go with the second question first. My question is for Lau. I wanted to know if you could speak on how do you think policy could incentivize innovation for the decarbonization of maritime transport, particularly considering you named quite an ambitious goal for net zero emissions.
Thank you for the questions. Let's go with Andrea first and then Lau.
Thank you very much for this question. And you're absolutely right. We have to decarbonize our whole supply network. And this is exactly the focus area of the First Movers Coalition. It is the supply network which has to be decarbonized. And when you just think about our company, I have 50,000 direct supply partners. So if I go down a little bit in the chain, then we talk about millions of companies, and you think, bloody hell, how do you want to decarbonize this network? So we took a very pragmatic approach. We looked into what are the key materials in our products. And then we came to that the highest content in our product is steel and die casting parts. And therefore, without going to part by part, supplier by supplier, it was clear this is where we have to start to decarbonize. And therefore, we went into a partnership with the Swedish steel producer SSAB, and we were the first who could show this year a commercial vehicle built out of fossil-free steel. We handed it over to the customer, and now it's in daily use in the operation. So we will now go through material by material. The next is aluminium, where we also made clear commitments to decarbonize, but we will also then go to polymers, electronics, etc. So this is how we do it, but when we talk about greenhouse gas neutral value chain 2040, it includes our supply network.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So policy can, for international shipping, the IMO can set the pathway that shipping needs to follow. So industry knows when to decarbonize at what level. In 2030, should that be 50% reductions? 2040, should that be 80-90%? So governments and the IMO can set that those targets for shipping, but also deciding on a carbon tax, a carbon levy. That revenue can then be spent on shipping decarbonization through different mechanisms that can go into specific projects. The EU is doing the same with the inclusion of shipping in the ETS. That revenue can go into the EU's Innovation Fund and other projects for shipping to then invest in different innovative technologies.
So to wrap up, I'll ask each of our panelists in 30 seconds to describe how can we work together to decarbonize the transport sector based on what we've seen today in the presentations. Let us start perhaps with Nicolas.
So I think it's a great moment to work in the transport sector. It used to be a bit of a boring sector run by engineers where a lot of many things was happening. Today is totally different. and there is every single mode, from all angles of stakeholders, civil society, private sector, institutions, government. Everybody is looking hard, and you have these all these ideas are coming. So it's really an exciting moment to partner, and I'm encouraged by the discussion today. And it's not only here, but in every forum that you go today in the international community talking about transport decarbonization, you can feel that energy.
Thank you.
I think the most important thing we can do is work together, and I think we've all talked about partnerships, and I think we need to push each other to raise our level of ambition and try and get the technologies that we need to scale and affordability. That means that everybody can make that switch in the time frame that we need, because we have very little time to make this happen.
Yeah, I think absolutely right that we need to work together. As I said, we also in parallel with that need policies to set the goals and the price mechanisms. But we also need to push each other. So one example is the cargo owners for zero-emission vessels. A lot of companies like IKEA, Nestle, DHL, they have said we will only ship our a lot of cargo volume with zero-emission vessels by 2040. So they're saying to shipping companies, if you don't do this, you can't do business with us. So I think we also need to push each other in a good direction. Thanks.
For me, it's very simple. Just start your actions. Don't stop talking, start to do something. Don't wait for legislation, don't wait for politics, don't wait for anyone to kick you. Just do it.
Last words from Gaspar Hassan.
Just cooperate to trans-technology between the distribute the companies, the country, to develop this to develop this action, and keep the policy out, do what's right.
So with that, I think that was a wrap up of our session. I hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you all for coming today.